This is where things begin to derail from the show's original direction, following the Tokyo subway sarin gas attack perpetrated by the all-machine Rikyo, as I mentioned before. And well, yeah, I had some issues with the first 8 episodes, such as the 600 million year thing, but outside of that absurdity, the first arc of Ohranger is overall solid. That, however, begins to change with episode 9 as the war begins to turn cold, as both sides settle in for the long haul and smaller skirmishes.
It's not an entirely out-of-nowhere shift either, thanks to Bacchus needing to call in reinforcements from other worlds while he rebuilds his army, but it never again reaches the open warfare point due to Toei's mandates altering stylization. Ohranger from this point on becoming more of a then-traditional Sentai series as opposed to one of more modern stylization, and also a lot sillier.
Though I'm not certain why this episode is the one pinned for that shift, and not episode 11, where they do more promptly start on the nonsense. While the event had happened a month before this one premiered, usually episodes are written and then shot about 6 weeks to 2 months before they air, the interim being editing to ready them for release.
I guess it's because most of the early episodes are high on action with little story, part of the recurring trend of Sugimura's years having a greater focus on event than character. Thus, when the silliness shifted in with this stylization still present, there was less story-wise to support justifying the nonsense, and by proxy interest in the cast for viewers to care about them enough to stick around. After all, if you had been given little reason to connect with and care about a cast, then why would you want to tune in?
This is, of course, assuming you are a normal, sane person who doesn't just watch media just because it's awful, or it's your job to review it.
But I still don't think it's fair to include 9 and 10 as part of the paradigm shift, as I do feel they end up being contiguous, with both episodes focused on Subterfuge Specialized Machine Beast, which used different approaches to subvert the Ohranger's fighting capability. It's just they weren't written by Sugimura.
And I should probably mention the other writers involved. Before the changes, the writing room involved work from solely Sugimura and Toshiki Inoue, his original involvement more than likely influenced by once more how they were trying to mimic the rampant success of Jetman.
Shozo Uehara did the movie, and joined the regular series with episode 10.
Episode 11, however, where I really see the drop in quality start, has the return of, at Toei's request, Showa-era Sentai head writer Hirohisa Soda.
I've mentioned the guy before, but Hirohisa Soda is the single longest writer Sentai has ever had, and has written more of it than any other person. He was in his heyday in the 80s, writing hit after hit, and in many ways was key to Sentai's consistency due to his continued presence since Go Ranger.
The man is more than worthy of respect and accolade, and is considered the Stan Lee of Super Sentai. But much like Stan Lee, he eventually stopped being a good writer, and so as time for that to happen began in the 90s.
The reason he stepped down in the first place as Sentai's head writer was because he was tapped out creatively after Live Man, and recycling worse reiterations of his past ideas and storylines for Turbo Ranger and 5-Man, and he recognized that. He had not been a writer involved much since 1990, and while he made a few additions to Kaku Ranger, his impact was limited to a few asinine filler. He'd essentially lost the spark of ingenuity from his earlier years that made his tales work, and as a result, his stories had become disjointed messes, slotting characters and situations into the series that contradicted and wildly contrasted against who they were and what was viable with them, as he completely disregarded such. Most of his work here fitting better in prior series than anything for this one, as if he didn't give a damn about his writing anymore, an idea that's only reinforced with time.
And while not all of his episodes can be written off, he only produced a few okay stories before it was right back to the crap that almost got Sentai cancelled in 5-Man. And it was even worse the next year with his additions to Gar Ranger. Most of the continued viewership exodus can be pinned on his tales in this series.
And much of the same can be said of Shozo Uehara by this point, as well as the show's final writer Susumu Takaku, though Takaku would have the sense to retire by episode 24.
And I mean in the permanent sense. On top of Sugimura, Susumu Takaku and Shozo Uehara would stop writing Sentai after this show.
As they'd been at this so long that they'd forgotten to adapt with the times or the fact this was a different series than the one where their tales were viable, mostly because they emphasized more ludicrous things not possible here and weren't what made many of the older shows work, or were integrated better to balance things back then as opposed to what was present here. The key being back then, they were able to pull off more well-written stories, as the problem is not the slapstick elements or the tonal shifts, but the failure to properly integrate them into the story and shift the paradigm so those lighter-hearted stories could work.
And that's right there is what I believe tanked Ohranger's viewership. Not the reaction to the war plots, but once more the robotic recycling of old ideas in worse ways because they were the safe move for Toei to make. If they didn't fit the show at all, and they had to abandon attempts to develop the cast as characters for the unnecessary guest actors' screen time in order to do it.
And similar to Takaku, the writer whose success the show is trying to mimic story-wise, Toshiki Inoue, would be booted off the show with episode 23.
And thus leaving the triumvirate of Sugimura, Soda, and Uehara to clash with their own ideas of the show's direction, focus, and tone.
Which begins with Juri and Momo shirking their patrol duties to go shopping.
And yeah, it was written by Inoue. Confound this writer. He drives me to drink.
Now, as much as we condemn the blatant sexism in Inoue's writing,
because the guy actually is fucking sexist, we have had enough evidence of that.
The thing about him here is he's the only one that does anything non-caustic character-wise with Juri and Momo. The other writers don't utilize or develop them, don't focus on the team individually but as a group, or leave them as either an idiot in a given situation or a damsel in distress.
AKA the things that fans liked about Jetman, since everyone had a story and personality.
So as much as it can irk people to see them acting unprofessional when they're the frontline soldiers in an actual war, I can't fault him for actually wanting to give them character. With Juri shown here as more of a Nabiki Tendo tomboy, where she's quick-thinking and a schemer, whereas Momo's more of the traditional Yamato Nadeshiko, despite the military profession she's chosen, and that actually explaining why when she's thrown out of her depth she tends to freak out. Both of which inform their actions in earlier episodes.
And this is completely disregarded by Soda, Takaku, and Uehara. You see why I don't like to pin the tonal shift on this episode?
The main plot involves Bara darts coming down and attacking the Ohranger with poison darts, tagging the guys with them using a silly bit of subterfuge that makes them drop their guard.
Poison dart!
This poison causes a rusting-like effect on them, with their skin first getting blemishes due to the body's metal deposits collecting into them, but as they spread, they'll slowly leave them paralyzed. No full team, no Ohranger Robo to stop their carriers, fighters, and macro-scale mechanoids, and the girls only have a few hours to try and uncover an antidote. And, as set up by Juri's wiliness, she endeavors to go about this in an unexpected way.
Curse your sudden but inevitable betrayal!
The response?
油断するな。女という生き物は嘘がうまいからな。
あなた、
いや、
今何とおっしゃいました？
Now, on one hand, I've said I don't really see this as response for the quality decline. On the other, this episode is a really damn funny execution to the betrayal deception.
So yeah, have fun with two women in live action trying to beat the crap out of each other, complete with panty shots due to how short Juri's dress is.
やれ。人間同士の殺し合いがこれほど面白いとはな。
Yes, it's clearly humans fighting, and not anything else.
Unfortunately, Juri's whole deception fails as though Darts is gullible. He's not stupid enough to just hand out its antidote to someone who out of nowhere switched sides. Meaning Juri's triumphant, fooled you speech turns into one of failure. Or does it? As while Momo was completely and utterly conned by Juri's actions, she decided to pull her own Xanatos gambit in return to secure the antidote and help the others. Paranoia reviews the fights with Ohranger Robo, the idea eventually coming up to try and disable its programming by hacking it, thus sending out Bara Hacker to various UAO installations to try and pull from its computers any details it can.
Bar a hacker, by the way, has to be on the short list of worst designed monsters in this series. It just looks awful.
But the advantage to its processing capabilities is it can, using data Baranoia has previously recorded, create an energy shield that protects its comparatively frail frame from destruction. It creates distractions from hacking other networks to draw the Ohrangers' attention away from its activity.
Though many of the things it hacks are in fact isolated systems even to this day. Hell, an easy way to get this guy to fail his mission? Physically pull the information it's hacking from their databases and isolate all of their computers from the network. Boom! Inserted problem solved.
はい、これまでよ。
なんだどうなってるんだ
Holy crap, Miura actually did that. What year is it?
Still, to defeat its adaptive barrier, the Ohranger call upon a new weapon Miura's developed. A giant spinning wheel? It's so ludicrous, Hacker can't even comprehend it to defend it against it!
Though the introduction of its existence is less than fulfilling. While it's obvious the UAO would be regularly churning out more tech in use against Baranoia, the problem with many of them, especially as the series goes on, is they're treated as if they've always been part of the arsenal and just unused up until now, instead of even bothering to say, hey, I finished this new thing you can use, so use it. Again, the recurring trend with the introduction issues is many of them were done by Soda, and Soda in this show acts as if he literally could not give a damn.
Speaking of Soda, his first episode starts out by a woman being unable to figure out why her unplugged fridge isn't working.
Because you are one?
This contrasts against the actual plot of the week, with Bar a printer, and its ability to make humans fall in love with technology. Yeah, you see why I prefer to think of this beginning the shift to stupid? Because while the root idea is a good one, brainwash humans to love Baranoia so their conquest is a bloodless coup, the execution makes the concept less palatable upon viewing.
Not surprised they didn't pick the low-hanging fruit of a men love their cars more than their wives joke.
Shut up, Momo! Shohei, however, because this is actually a Shohei episode, comes up with the idea of how to subvert them implementing this, with getting into a fight with Acha, which results in the more dim-witted of the recurring robots to realize, hey, he's great! He should make people praise him for once in his miserable existence. This leads to them then leading Printer into an ambush amongst a bunch of construction crates, which limits the visibility to use its Lovu beam, and in turn having that attack reflected back on it, which summarily breaks its hypnosis ability.
Really? 'Cause this isn't the first time by far I've seen this gambit.
Next, his terrier gets angry at babies being babies.
研究の結果人間はみんな赤ちゃんを可愛いと思うように脳みそにインプットされていることが分かった。
Really? Oh, mine must be broken, because I think they're hellspawn.
Thus, she deploys Bara Baby, who uses a power that augments baby cries so the sound waves become destructive.
And how is that different from normal babies? Again, how is this different from normal babies?
Yeah, this is another episode in a recent trend of only being able to watch crap with the sound turned off, because the sound design is just that awful to those with sensitive hearing.
Considering the birth rate stagnation in Japan the last 20 years, that line's just a bit on the nose.
This is a Goro episode where one of his neighbors dumps their child on him for the day, only for them to be affected by this, and the group's whole inexperience of dealing with children, meaning they're often at ground zero when the destructive sound waves start, before Goro in turn needs to rescue the screaming brat when he's kidnapped to be used as a weapon. Still, good plan for the most parts, even if it does involve ear rape.
And I mean that literally. My ears were bleeding after watching this one.
Episode 13 has Bara Magma make an excavation of the magma beneath Mount Fuji in hopes of jump-starting the largest of Japan's volcanoes. But the explosions it uses alerting the Ohranger to its activities. Problem is, they're not localized, so they foolishly split the party. Momo being the one to find the strike force, and as established, Momo is pretty much useless, so is thus forced on the run with a sprained ankle and lacking her power brace, only to be saved by, of all things, a dog.
I'm having flashbacks to the Toei Spider-Man show I reviewed last month. Appropriate, since recycled plot, and the writer for this one being Susumu Tagaku, who wrote on that show.
Actually, it's revealed by the family that are directed to her rescue. This animal appears to be the manifestation of a guardian spirit of the local mountain who's been trying to help people endangered from the excavation, and in a way save its home by allowing the survivors to send warnings that had pretty much gone unheard of or recognized for quite some time now.
Because number Johnny 5 is alive! What, I really like the Short Circuit movies.
By the way, a spirit? As said, this was intended to be a more modern-age sci-fi series, so the presence of spirits seems very much out of place narratively, even though I know it's an aspect of Japanese culture to be accepting of their reality, and there being something of a means of it through the whole nature and mysticism versus technology dynamic. That's not actually an element of the series to any degree outside of very rare instances. Still, the dog retrieves Momo's other power brace so she can transform and solo the monster, only after the dog's spirit appears to be killed.
Way to show your competence, Momo.
Actually, because of that, she unlocks some form of legacy ability with the powers, and now levels up to finally be on the other's level. Oh, and the dog spirit? Just fine. I have transcended death. Now scratch behind my ears. Episode 14 hat.
What? I don't do clowns, I don't do marionettes.
This thing works at Shohei's favorite ramen restaurant and is the first of a line of human helper robots.
Stop. We know where this is going. They're being made by paranoia's covert infiltrators so they can then spring Skynet on us when no one is the wiser.
Though the Ohranger once again acts smart in at least checking out the facility first, though missing the fact that all of the workers are paratroopers, which kind of ruins that interpretation of their actions. Well, Robot Apocalypse ahoy!
選挙でピノキオの代議士が選ばれ、やがてピノキオの総理大臣が誕生するやもしれぬ。
You do realize that there's a few steps between helper robots and being elected to the highest governmental office, right? I mean, first you need to be recognized as a sentient being legally, then there's the matter of citizenship, the question of the robot rights movement, robosexual rights in marriage.
Don't date robots!
To not even address formulating a political career, frankly, just going back to the conquest route would permit you to do this before the turn of the next century.
Sure enough, the cover is blown when a kid that is more intelligent than our protagonists uncovers evidence of Pinocchio being evil. While on the comparative front of competence, Jury showed she now has none as she almost brought a toy Pinocchio with a bomb inside into their base.
Get ready for a surprise!
See? I'm not the only one on that. This is why I give Inoue slack this series.
But with the cover now blown, Paranoia has the Pinocchios plant bombs as their base model becomes Bara Pinokiller.
Oh god, that pun. It physically hurts.
Then Bacchus oversees the production of new forces, only to trash the faulty instead of fixing them. The trash resulting in
Holy crap, Paranoia destroyed Z-Ranger's guardian beasts. Good on them!
Anyways, the scrap materials from enough partially functioning androids networking combine themselves into Bara Revenger.
Revenge. The most worthless of causes.
This amalgamation having a vendetta.
貴様はなぜ捨てた？なぜ殺した？
Oh yeah, this thing hates Bacchus for his abuse of his own kind. Complex characterization how I love thee.
It's banished from the moon to Earth, where Yuji ends up encountering it, and this is where I need to readdress Yuji. See, everyone brought onto the show likes to treat Yuji as the butt monkey, but Sugimura and by proxy Inoue, who penned this one, more likes to use him as the team's heart with his displays of compassion, shown with how he rescues a stray dog, and that stray factoring into the story by allowing him to see that borrowed Revenger might actually be on their side with how it later saves it from a car with zero prompting. And this is after a sequence of events where it actively prevented itself from harming anyone that went and attacked it. The various displays of compassion making Yuji decide to do what is admittedly something stupid, but he felt he had good reason for doing, and uses his storage crystal to recharge Revenger's power supply, which is shown to be horribly inefficient and the cause of his earlier conflict with humanity. And it does work out, with Yuji having earned from the act Revenger's respect and trust, as an ally of humanity against the cruelty of Bacchus. Unfortunately, things turn bad when Acha arrives with a control device they attach to Revenger, forcibly enslaving it back to Baranoia's cause. But even then, it resists with every fiber of being it has. Though ultimately its body betrays its wishes, Yuji makes it his duty to save it from itself.
他の者は傷つけぬ。それが俺の誇りだ。お前の誇り、俺が守ってやる。
Thus, Yuji levels up with his own Chouriki special attacks, and even using the giant roller himself to break the control device, though also critically damage Revenger.
何より悲しみ。俺の誇りを守ってくれた。俺の魂はお前たちと共にいつかお前たちがバッカスフンドを倒すまで。俺はスクラップから生まれた。そして今スクラップに帰る。
And thus, Revenger crumbles to junk, alone, bar the stray dog he saved, as he dies.
This is easily the best episode of the show, the highest rated episode with exclusion to the premiere, a sign of the better stories that tippled the less well-executed tales, how Toshiki Inoue got his acclaim for more than Jetman before his career went to crap, and a showing of what the show really could have been had it not been derailed.
Unfortunately, it contrasts badly against the next episode, with Bara Devil.
Because musical hands are the devil's playthings. Wait, no, that's idle hands. Unless we're talking about the robot devil.
Anyways, it uses its music to create sonnets of destruction that somehow, some way, pull a kid from the future into the modern era.
Maybe he played the Song of Time? Wait, no, he doesn't have an ocarina.
But something the kid has is working on the same frequency as the devil's music, maybe as the pick of destiny, meaning Shohei, who's closest, has to defend the boy, and bring him in to protective custody. Oh, god damn it!
Then why were you running away from him? This entire episode is like that.
Yeah, the kid from 2295 knows jack about how he got here, but ends up making friends with this kid, Mikio, that somehow, someway, is the first of the list of recurring characters this series.
I mean, yeah, it's once more solving a complaint I had with Zooranger's guest child actor legion, as none of them were recurring, which could have at least partially validated some of the idiot kid plots, but much as is the problem with including children in these shows, we do not, and are not made, to care about them even as audience self-insert XPs.
Worse, Mikio does very little in the episodes where he is featured, which actually describes every single member of the recurring cast. More often than not, eating time that could have been given to character from the people in the show that actually mattered.
Oh, also, this episode makes mention of something called a time slip. That's the actual name of types of stories where people are pulled out of place and time by unknown means. It's a lesser-used descriptor for it, however, with most people just preferring the catch-all phrase of time travel.
As you would expect, they eventually figure out how to send the future boy home, with him having made a friend in the past that he'll never see again. Episodes 17 and 18 are a two-parter revolving around and his efforts to ally with Paranoia, as Yuji is tricked by the deception of a Bara trooper attempting to abduct a boy, only for it to be corroded in disguise as part of a deception to plunder his transformation brace.
No. Depending on your view of workplace professionalism, thus far that's either Juri or Momo.
He gets away with the storage crystal, which is the most concerning thing about this as, well, the storage crystals? Miura didn't make those, and cannot in any way replicate them.
Remember that, this gets inane when they introduce the Ore Bazooka.
As they are artifacts he excavated from a dig site of the super ancient civilization. This by proxy explains why there's only this special team that's been endowed, instead of the gear being mass-produced. But with something so rare and essential to the Ohrangers' war effort, it's easy to see why Kuroda would want one in order to negotiate with Paranoia.
Preach it, brother!
And his demands are not unreasonable. To rule Japan in their stead once they conquer the world. And this is a good deal. I figure the dude has the best 30 years to him. Past that, you reclaim the territory. No muss, no fuss.
Sadly, the logic-driven robots do not do the smart thing and just agree to it, instead planning to backstaboo the dude.
Specifically by killing Yuji so the brace is useless as a bargaining piece. Even though they could just reassign the powers. So, yeah, they deploy Bara Vacuum.
Does that look like Vile from Mega Man X to anyone else?
But it turns out the missing brace is in fact inside Kuroda's son Shigeru. No, not on, in. As his son is a robot.
The newest Terminator sequel is weird.
Yeah, Geppetto over here lost his real son in an accident, thus desired to make a real boy to cope. And the grief and unwillingness to accept that death has pretty much driven him insane. His deal with Paranoia in hopes that this simulacrum, and that is a really hard word to say, would be accepted amongst them and be left immortal in silicon perfection long after he is gone. Though the real Shigeru is still in this doll, as Kuroda had copied his consciousness into it, and why the robot boy is on the Ohranger's side as opposed to having hidden directives. Oh look, hidden directives! Yeah, that comes later, after Kuroda meets with Bacchus, who thinks the man a lunatic, but a lunatic he can use. Though even Bacchus is surprised at the depth of Kuroda's hatred, for frankly shallowly explored reasons at that. I mean, it's not like he's going to turn himself into a total monster over this.
I stand corrected. You really went all in with the tentacle hentai monster this time.
Incidentally, to reference a more recent series, does this look like a precursor to the fusion hybrid Roidmutes of Kamen Rider Drive to anyone else? The group succeed in appealing to Kuroda's humanity, with Shigeru managing to undock himself from the abominable fusion, while Kuroda's trapped in a reproduction of the underlying robot, Bara Ivy, even after he's seen that he may have been wrong. Kuroda sacrificing himself so they can get Shigeru to safety. The android boy is taking damage, but it's subsequently fixed up.
And thus, Shigeru changed his name to Satoshi Tajiri to start his Pokemon adventure as eternally 10 years old.
Next, Bara Builder, already a giant, absorbs power from a transformer, using it to gain armament in turn against all of Ohranger Robo's attacks. Yes, they finally made a machine beast that can turn the tide and beat down Ohranger Robo.
Meaning, it's time for the early season robot arsenal upgrade!
Said robot is Red Puncher, which is discovered when they inexplicably receive a Chouriki power reading from an area Miura recognizes as its resting place.
And the fact that reading comes out of nowhere and is never explained is very problematic story-wise, as everything after hinges on it.
Goro goes to track it down despite Miura's orders not to, encountering a girl named Miyuki who's praying at an impromptu grave for her brother Shunpei. That was the Red Puncher's original pilot, having deployed in it 2 years before when the Baranoia originally scouted the planet for later conquest, and wasn't in any regards able to pilot, let alone control the giant robot.
And there's another problematic part, as you need a reason why the man's dead without diminishing the capabilities of this prototype weapon, but none of the Ohranger Megazords have any type of artificial intelligence with which to resist being piloted like that. Meaning it had to be user error and the man's own idiocy that got him killed, which is backed up by the evidence of the man's character as is showcased on screen. But the episode never treats it like that inside of its narrative, instead of making it just another thing Miura has to feel guilty over, which is never validated. And it treats it as if the machine is wild and needs to be tamed, but it doesn't.
Worse, this creates the bigger plot hole of why they were even building this giant robot back then, if Miura's super ancient technology research was only taken seriously after this Baranoia scouting party came, so they all knew there was a threat encroaching upon Earth they needed to prepare for. This robot thus becomes the chicken in the chicken and egg paradox, and there is no explanation which remedies that. Still, Kocha managed to overhear the entire thing, meaning Baranoia is after the errant robot, with Goro rushing back to the machine to get it working. He likewise inexplicably has an awful time piloting it, and is pushed to the brink of defeat until... Deus Ex Machina no Jutsu! Yes, Shunpei's spirit comes to him, somehow, and explains to Goro the concept of clear mind, which allows him the mindset needed to bring Red Puncher to heel. And thus, Robot Punch! Robot Kick! Rapid Punches! Double time it!
Yeah, this story is stupid. It's admittedly enjoyable despite the gaping plot holes involved, which this thus beginning the Red Puncher arc.
Thus continuing when Boldant...
Why are most of the plots of the week Boldant's doing anyways?
Anyways, Boldant goes about studying boxing in hopes of creating an anti-Red Puncher machine beast to nip the newest thorn in Baranoia's side. The resultant machine being Bara Boxer, and dear God, that face!
Load the spaceship with the rocket fuel. Load it with the worst.
Boldant lures out Shohei by kidnapping Mikio, when really, they didn't need to kidnap a kid in the first place. Only just appear right in front of any of the Ohranger. But the thing is, they singled out Shohei because of his skill as a boxer.
What? Shohei is trained as a boxer? Funny, that was never introduced, nor would it ever be mentioned again or play into any aspect of his character.
Okay, that's not entirely true. We do in one episode later see him pilot the Red Puncher. In a battle, the Ohranger lose. Whoops. And I don't get why they needed Shohei in the first place to improve Bara Boxer, since they already programmed in every technical manual and, I presume, all visual data about the martial art they could possibly need, since all it takes for him to learn Shohei's fighting style is to see it in action. Though this fight does result in Shohei breaking his hand, which prevents him from effectively training Goro and how to box so he can pilot and fight using Red Puncher better, which then becomes the episode focus after the first round is undecisive. Instead, Shohei calls in a favor of the man who instructed him, who only has about 2 minutes of screen time, and only a fraction of that is actually bothering to train Goro as he's a total jerk to Shohei, because the man quit to join the military, and with such a shallow but deep-seated resentment. You should expect him to change his mind with absolutely no prompting, just by seeing Shohei train Goro absolutely horribly.
Wait, no, reverse that. He changed his mind with no provocation. And past this, his involvement in the episode is worthless since he trains Goro the same way Shohei was, so what was the point?
Though one thing I will give this plot that is entirely failed on later, the episode remembers and recognizes that just because you train your body to learn a physical skill, that does not mean you can transfer that up to the piloting of a giant robot. With martial arts, it's more about knowing how to move than the movement itself, and a lot of that is not going to translate into motions made with controls.
Now, if you piloted something like the robots from G Gundam, that's different since those use motion controls, thus you can easily make the skill transition. But that doesn't work with the grand majority of Super Sentai Mecha, and Ohranger in particular.
Instead, they show a scene of Goro piloting the Red Puncher to learn how to use the boxing moves he's learned while piloting the robot, learning to adapt those skills to the differing interface. Thus, in the rematch, even though Bulldog tries to pull a bunch of dirty tricks, which brings us to Ohranger's infamous Mecha dancing scene.
And in context, it completely makes sense.
As it's building off of last episode with Goro improving his ability to actually pilot the Red Puncher through the difficult movements known as modern dancing, while they're also testing the repairs to Ohranger Robo to make sure it's back to full functionality, which it is not. Still, the rest of the team seemed jealous of Goro getting his own solo giant robo. Hey, morons, did you forget your own solo robos? You also get more screen time piloting the combined mech than any other team before you. Anyways, with this growing envy, Yuji, as this is a Soda script which thus makes him the butt monkey, jumps at the chance Mikio brings them, a little girl acting as a representative of her town in wanting someone to pilot their giant kendama robot made entirely of wood.
There is just so much stupid contained in that summary.
1. Why is a little girl the sent representative for a governmental request over an adult that would actually had to authorize such? 2. How did this girl know Mikio to know he has a connection to the Ohranger? 3. Why would they think Mikio would be a better contact to get to them instead of going through the military organization they work for, which would have to authorize such? 4. Why the fuck would you build a robot out of wood?
Can bite my splintery wooden ass!
Alright, rephrase. Why would you build a giant robot out of wood? Wood fiber is not that known for taking weight and stress well when you reach weights of hundreds of tons, let alone several thousand like most of Sentai's giant monsters and robots. It's why larger buildings are made of steel and stone, because otherwise they would collapse under their own weight if they were just wood. The same principle applies here. This thing literally cannot move without tearing itself apart.
And keep in mind, this is from a nation that knows giant robots. The RX-78-2, last I checked, is still on display in Odaiba. So this is nonsense even to the Japanese, let alone the more modern sci-fi focus of the setting Ohranger is supposed to have, that Soda's episodes are once more breaking entirely from.
And for that price, you could have made a giant robot that would actually work.
そこでロボット操縦の名人を探していたら、それはもうオーレンジャーしかいないということで、ユージさんに。
Except, you know, the 16 previous teams of heroes that piloted giant robots.
Well, Yuji tries to pilot the robot, but...
Bitch, please! Hikari, show him how it's done!
光、考え事するときはいつもけん玉やってる。
Though, ironically, this would have worked as a story in Tokuger. How sad is that?
Paranoia's role in this? They, for some stupid reason, switched this insipid wood robot with the machine beast, which they then trap Yuji inside of when he comes to pilot it again, taking him as a hostage against the others. But Shohei takes the time to find the real one.
Or you could have, I don't know, deployed the other robot the Ohranger have access to?
'Cause the result is the same. They restrained the fake to get out Yuji, only this way using a robot that should have torn itself apart. Thus we come to the final episode of the Red Puncher arc, with the two mechs playing sports.
You know, I defend the dancing thing as testing and training mobility, but this is where I draw the line.
It's just a precursor to them trying to perform a combination of the machines, which fails because Red Puncher is missing a circuit essential to it accepting the commands.
Then, replace it? It's not a component salvage from the super ancient race. Miura built the entire thing from scratch. He still has the blueprints, so he can manufacture and replace any existing component. Hell, this shows him as incompetent, by not noting that it's missing part and already replacing it before this.
Though this asks the question, if this robot came before the one it's combining with, then how would it be tailor-made to be able to combine with the Ohranger Robo in the first place? Because they didn't refit it to this, as otherwise they would have noticed this part missing. And how did this component go missing in the first place? The circuit is for internal systems deep within the machine, and when it was buried, it didn't even take external damage or was jostled enough for it to fall loose, let alone get out of the machine entirely like it's said to in this episode. Hell, since Red Puncher was buried for years, that original circuit has to be entirely useless simply from weather damage, meaning they need a replacement anyways. But nope! They need to go and find the original circuit to make the Red Puncher capable of combining.
This episode, if you can't tell, in its entirety is one big idiot plot. A story set in motion only because everyone involved is being an idiot. And if I haven't convinced you yet, they don't ever retrieve the circuit. It ends up destroyed, and Miura has already installed a replacement component. But if he has the means of creating a replacement component, it means he should have that data.
What they actually needed from it is a code sequence that Miura should already know installed into that circuit, as it would have been part of the blueprints of Red Puncher to have that code in its programming. Thus, they would have a copy of it already if they ever needed to make repairs or reinstall it. And if Red Puncher is still lacking that circuit, then that code that ends up being inputted would not have been accepted by the robot to trigger the combination. Worse, the reason they don't ever get it is because it's fallen into the hands of a random brat that inexplicably found it on the ground, who thinks a circuit board is a memory chip that he installs into a device his father made that didn't have enough memory to work right, and it still doesn't work after he found that component last year, and has only recently installed it in the device to learn it's useless to him. Meaning, he already knows the device doesn't work with this new component, and yet still won't give it to those that need it and that it actually belongs to. Worse, Paranoia learns they just need to break this thing to win.
And yet the brat is still obstinate about giving up something that's worthless to him, even though his life is in danger.
Well, Paranoia proceeds to destroy the device and the circuit. I'd say evil wins, but that thing story-wise was worthless in the first place.
Bullshit! Bullshit! Computers do not work that way!
For the record, that device was a talking box. It was designed and programmed so as to respond to inputs placed into it. It was essentially a handheld Turing test for sentience. A 90s version of Cleverbot.com or any number of chatbots that mimic human interaction. It does not have the ability, neither in software or hardware, to burn digital information into someone's back.
Doesn't anyone notice this? I feel like I'm taking crazy pills!
But in the interim, with the code finally reinstalled into another circuit that Miura should have just input the damn code he already had in the first place, the Ohranger can combine their two mechs into Buster Ohranger Robo. And as much as it's baffling the mech can do this combination doesn't look bad. It's just adding a pair of cannons, backpack, and badass sixth helmet. I always have an issue when combinations just have feet and torso armor change. So the artillery look for it I found to be nice.
The Red Puncher arc is where the series really begins to drop the ball.
While not all of it was stupid, it was where the bigger story failings more promptly reared their heads, and pretty much solely because of Hirohisa Soda.
And the worst thing about this is not even the worst episode in the series. That, my friends, is next time.